This video looks at using the cosine law to find missing side length and missing angles in a triangle. So the cosine law is used in triangles that are non-right triangles that don't have the corresponding angle side length pair that we looked at for the sine law. So here's an example where we have the 60-degree angle. We're trying to find side C, the side that goes with that angle, but we don't have another angle side pair. So that's when we can use the cosine law. And the cosine law basically gives us a relationship between the side lengths and an angle. It says this right here, that c squared is equal to a squared plus b squared minus 2ab cos c. Again, you should start by labeling your triangles. If we're talking about this triangle here, angle A is here, side length A is at the opposite end of the triangle, angle C here, already labeled as side length C, and finally angle B is over here, so side length B is over here. When you use the cosine law, it's important to notice here that the side length that's over here corresponds to the angle over here. And we can write this sine law in a bunch of different ways depending on which side or angle we're trying to find. So here it is in different ways. Again, just making sure that the side length here corresponds to the angle, side length, angle, and then the other two values go in between. And the order doesn't matter. If you wanted to, you could switch B and C over here, and again, switch these two around. It doesn't really make a difference. So let's go through and look at an example of how to use the cosine law. And we'll use the triangle that we have here already. We've got it labeled. We're trying to find C, side C. So let's go ahead and do that. So because we're trying to use side C, we're going to look for the cosine law that has the c squared here on the left. And we'll just start plugging in some values and going from there. So the cosine law says that c squared equals a squared plus b squared minus 2ab cos c. We don't know what side C is, so we'll leave that. We know that A is 26. B is 12, right up here. A is still 26, B is still 12. And we know that the angle is 60 degrees. Angle C is 60 degrees, so we can put that in as well. We're going to just start simplifying here a little bit. 26 squared works out to 676. 12 squared is 144. We can do this part right here, 2 times 26 times 12. That works out to 624. Cos 60. Now it's really tempting here for a lot of students to kind of look at this and say, all right, we've got some addition and subtraction here, let's take care of that. But before you can do that, you need to remember that the understood operation in here is multiplication, and you need to do the multiplication before you deal with any kind of subtraction. So the multiplication has to come before this subtraction. So don't just add the 676 to 144 and then subtract the 624, because this 624 is multiplied by cos 60. So we'll go ahead and add the first two numbers. So 676 and 144 gives us 820. And again, we can just evaluate this part right here. This part right here is just a number, 624 times the cos of 60. Make sure your calculator's in degree mode. That should give us about 312. And we'll just keep going. 820 minus 312 is 508. We want to solve for c, not c squared, so we're going to take the square root of both sides. And if we take the square root of 508, we get approximately 22.5. So that means that in this triangle that we just looked at, C here is about 22.5 centimeters. So that's how you can use the cosine law to find a missing angle in a triangle. Sorry, a missing side length. Now we'll look at how we can actually use it to find a missing angle. So here's a triangle. In this case, we have three sides. We're asked to find angle Q Angle Q is this one over here. Notice, again, we have 3 sides. We don't have that angle side pair that we need for the sine law, so we're going to use the cosine law. And because we're trying to find angle Q, we're going to make sure we use the version of the cosine law that has Q on the left side. And now we're just going to start plugging everything in. So Q, probably a good idea to label this. Here's angle Q, so side Q is over here. Angle R is here. Side length R must be over here. And finally, P is, side P is right here. So let's plug in the values. Q is 7, so we get 7 squared. P is 10, and R is 8. And we don't know what Q is, so we'll just leave it blank. We can start to simplify this a little bit. 7 squared is 49. 10 squared is 100. 8 squared is 64. 2 times 10 times 8 is 160, so we're going to subtract 160 cos Q. Again, we have that situation where we're kind of looking here and saying, oh, let's just add and subtract, but don't forget, this 160 is multiplied by cos Q, so we need to worry about that multiplication before we can do the subtraction. We can go ahead and add the 100 and the 64. But we can't subtract the 160 from the 164. We need to get Q. Remember, our goal is to solve for Q. So we need to isolate the term that has Q in it. We need to get this term all by itself, which means that we need to get rid of this term. And the way that we get rid of that term, it's a positive 164, so we'll subtract 164 on the right. If we do that on the right, we must do it on the left as well. So 49 minus 164 is negative 115. On the right, we're left with negative 160 cos Q. Again, we're trying to isolate for Q, so let's work on getting this term all by itself. To do that, we need to undo this multiplication by negative 160, and we undo that multiplication with a division by negative 160. We can plug negative 115 over negative 160 into our calculators, and we get 0.71875. And on the right, we're left with cos Q. Well, we need to solve for Q. The way that we solve for Q is by doing the inverse cos. We want to undo cos so that Q is all by itself, and if we undo cos, we do that with the inverse cos, and you can do that on your calculator, usually pressing a shift or a second button and the cos button. Typically here, you can go to 4 decimal places, will be plenty. There were only 5, so I took all 5, but certainly 4 would work. So when we do that on the calculator, we get that Q is approximately 44 degrees. I'm going to round that to the nearest degree. So this angle here, Q, 44 degrees. And then if we wanted to, we could actually use the sine law, because we now have an angle and its corresponding side length. We could use the sine law to find angle P or angle R and go from there. So that's, in a nutshell, that's the cosine law, finding the missing side length or a missing angle.